take any questions you may have.
So what went on in there, because I couldn't get in, so...
Joe, I was standing next to you in the hallway. Next question.
Judge Smith seems somewhat skeptical about
it. Seriously, tell me what. Give me a synopsis for radio.
Well, here, the bottom line is that we feel strongly that as long as the polls are open in Ohio, whether it's a day before, 2 days before, 3 days before, 34 days before, that every Ohioan, including 900,000 veterans, Blue Star and Gold Star moms, should have the chance to cast their ballots. It's not a Democratic or Republican issue. It's an issue of access to the polls. When the appropriate legislation was passed by the Ohio House and Senate, signed into law by then Governor Bob Taft, it was the intent that we would open up the process to avoid long lines in the days before elections, as we saw in 2004. When that piece of legislation was passed in early and then mid-2006 and then signed into law by a Republican governor, the intent was not to create classes. The intent was to open up the process. And our action today and the actions that will certainly come in the future between now and Election Day in 2012 are going to try and open up the doors of boards of elections all across the state.
It seemed like one of the key arguments they were making in there on the other side is that that the current law already allows for accommodations for military voters, such as they get their ballots earlier, they can fax them in, whereas regular voters cannot. They're saying, look, we already do this in other places, so we should be able to do this here as well.
Well, perhaps they mentioned that the additional step of literally opening up the ballot or the polls, that's a concern to us, because with the passage of House Bill 194 and then the petitions that were gathered to place that particular issue on the ballot for a referendum, and then subsequently the legislature repealing portions of the bill, it still left open the fact that millions of Ohioans can't access the polls in the final 3 days, and there's no good reason to suggest that they shouldn't. I respect, as a family member of a person who's served 5 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the son of a Blue Star mom, I don't need to be lectured by anyone about access to the polls for the military. There are those of us, including myself, including Senator and Representative Fedor, including Bob Crosby and so many others, who know this issue inside and out from a family perspective, and we know and respect the law. But in this case, when repeal of House Bill 194 occurred, there was an intent by the Republicans in the legislature to carve out and then limit voters in those final 3 days. We would like every voter the chance to access the polls. It's as simple as that. It's no different than John most recently suggesting that in Butler County they can stay open to midnight or 9 o'clock, and in Franklin County they've got to stay open until 5. We just think the process should be more open and more Ohioans should have the chance to vote. And oddly enough, for some, they think it's counterintuitive. I believe that if Democrats, Republicans, Independents have that chance, Democrats are going to win because we're right on the issues. Not because we happen to be Democrats and we're running against Republicans. It's just we simply believe we're right on the issues.
There have been numbers been thrown out there about how many people voted during those 3 days in 2008. But do you have a sense of has there been an analysis that you've done or
Yes.
others that shows that if these days were closed off,
Yes.
just how many of those may not end up voting?
Yeah, according to our information collected on our own voter file, 93,000 Ohioans voted in the final 72 hours in the 2008 cycle. You can judge that because those who vote in person, the boards of elections are compelled to list the names of those who have voted. Not how they voted, of course, but how they voted. And through a process of collecting that information from all 88 counties in the 2008 cycle, we've determined that 93,000 Ohioans voted in the final 3 hours, or 3 days.
But do you know how many of those would not vote if this wasn't? Obviously, they're not all just going to not vote.
Right.
If those days aren't open. So do you know how many?
As public policy makers, we should never make decisions based on presumptions. Here's the empirical evidence that would suggest that 93,000 people who voted in the 2008 cycle cannot vote in 2012. Will not vote is another question. This makes that process perhaps a bit more difficult. And the franchise, like all of our constitutional rights, is protected. And the Equal Protection Clause ensures that the rights of all Ohioans are protected equally. And that's the mere suggestion here. It's again not about Republicans versus Democrats. It's not about John Husted versus Chris Redfern. It's not about Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney. It's about ensuring that the intent of the law passed in 2006 and signed by a Republican governor is enforced. And that intent was to have, as Teresa Fedor and I know because we actually were there, this law was written by John Husted and Kevin DeWine largely in the House of Representatives. It was to ensure that long lines, whether they be on the final 3 days or the preceding 33 days, don't exist. We estimate, based on voter behavior and the information we collected after the after the 2004 cycle, that 15,000 Franklin County voters left the line and didn't vote on Election Day 2004 because the lines were so long. John Husted, and I take him at his word, having known him for a long time, when he says he wants to ensure every Ohioan has a chance to vote, we're going to take him up on it. And the key word is every.
The other side of this says, we have early voting here. I mean, it's not hard. You can mail your ballot in beforehand. Why does everybody wait till the last minute to vote? Why aren't you folks out trying to...
The great thing about our constitutional rights, we don't have to defend them rhetorically against the advances of those in an opposite political party. If I want to exercise my free speech by shouting or whispering, one shouldn't have to ask me why I'm shouting or whispering. I'm exercising the rights that are guaranteed to me by the Constitution and the state and federal laws. And in this case, state law has been clear since 2006, October 2006, that those 35 days, not 33, not 750 hours, not the things that John has said, but those 35 days are protected and open to the public to vote. It's as simple as that.
I think there's a clarification of in-person early voting, which I think has been clearly defined in this case and what we just heard in the court. So in that case, as a veteran and the veterans behind me, we want and have fought for everyone to have access to their ballot and their franchise and have that ballot counted. So Republicans voted for early voting and in-person early voting back in 2005, signed 2006. It seems as though they're clawing back now that we've had 95,000 or more people vote in 2008. And I can't help but think that they want to change the dynamics of what happened. I think that could also cause long lines again, and people confused about when they can vote or if they can vote, or if something happens and there's an emergency in their family, happens Sunday night, they don't have in-person voting like a military person. So I don't know if anyone else wants to respond as a veteran, but I think we take these things very, very seriously and having everyone's right to vote.
Well, my name is Paul Worley, and I'm a former Army captain, served 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. And I really wanted to be here today because, I got the information that they were trying to restrict veterans, which is absolutely false. And, as a veteran who served in a combat zone, I was an infantry officer, so I was out there slugging it out, with the Iraqis every day, that we want to have everybody have the option to go vote, regardless of whether you're military or not, because we're not restricting that, but we're making it more available to people to vote, because that's, my God, that's our most precious right in a democracy. And when you've actually sacrificed years of your life and seen friends die, and I worked at Arlington Cemetery, and part of our job was at Dover, where we took the bodies off of the planes and took them off to the morgue. There was a sign there that said, "Freedom has a flavor the protected will never know." And I would love a lot more decision makers and lawyers and different people to understand that, man, we ought to make voting so much easier for people. We ought to be doing anything and everything we can to get them to the polls to exercise their right to vote, because that's our most precious freedom. And I fought for it, and I would die for it still.
How do you spell your last name?
Worley, W-O-R-L-E-Y.
And where are you from?
Adams County, Ohio.
Where at in Adams County? I'm sorry, what town?
Peebles, Ohio, P-E-E-B-L-E-S.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks.